Most people underestimate the duration of forever, likening it to the abstract concept of infinity. However, for me, forever was distinctly defined as 15 years, 2 months, 27 days, and some hours. It began with a heartfelt proposal to my wife, Tracy, and ended abruptly in a restaurant where I unexpectedly witnessed her passionately kissing another person. I happened upon them by chance, observing their intimate moments from a nearby table. My initial curiosity turned quickly to shock, disgust, and anger as I realized Tracy was now involved with someone else. Despite my urge to confront them, I restrained myself, sitting in disbelief throughout their meal. They seemed oblivious to the world around them, engrossed in each other's company, while I struggled with waves of rage and helplessness. The realization that Tracy was bisexual added another layer of complexity to my emotions, though the betrayal overshadowed all else. Our vows, our commitment, they seemed shattered in that moment, leaving me feeling utterly deceived and lost. As they left the restaurant hand in hand, I sat there, grappling with the enormity of what had transpired. The notion of forever, once so secure, now felt fragile and uncertain. I settled my bill, drove home in silence, my mind racing with unanswered questions and a future suddenly unclear. Tracy didn't expect me home until the following day from our work trip, but fortunate timing allowed me to finish early and head back on Friday evening instead of Saturday afternoon as planned. I had been away since Monday and was eagerly looking forward to reuniting with Tracy and our children. Typically, we didn't go more than 3 days without intimacy, so I was feeling a bit restless, at least until my unexpected stop at the restaurant. Being an hour away from home and ahead of schedule, I decided to take a break from driving and grab dinner. Little did I know what awaited me there. Our kids, aged 12 and 10, were old enough to manage for an evening if Tracy wanted to go out, so I had no concerns about that. I couldn't help but wonder if they were aware of what was happening, as they had never mentioned anything unusual to me. Perhaps they, like me, were completely in the dark. During the ride home, I couldn't help but ponder over what had gone wrong, how long this had been going on behind my back. I tried to inject some humor into the situation, thinking at least I didn't need to worry about some arbitrary competition. I arrived home around 9 p.m., and Tracy wasn't there yet. Our daughters, Lisa and Ariel, greeted me warmly, showing no signs of unease about my early return. However, when Tracy finally arrived about 2 hours later, it was clear she wasn't expecting me. She had obviously hurried to tidy up upon seeing my car in the garage, and her expression wasn't as cheerful as it had been earlier. She immediately questioned my early return with a hint of worry in her voice. I teased her about the reception, but she quickly explained she had ordered pizza for the kids and grabbed a quick meal with Kate from her office, a blonde colleague she had mentioned in passing. I couldn't help but notice her avoidance of eye contact and the slight twitch of her forehead as she spoke. I played along, recalling the vivid descriptions Tracy had shared about Kate's charisma. Tracy continued, joking about Kate's effect on people, but her demeanor hinted at something more beneath the surface. And how does a married woman get so turned on? I pondered silently to myself. Kate was undeniably attractive, boasting the curves and bust of a goddess at her young age of 26. She had joined the insurance company where Tracy worked about a year ago, and the two had quickly become close friends. It was becoming increasingly clear that their relationship had developed into something more intimate. At 39, Tracy still commanded attention with her blonde hair, ample chest, and alluring figure that had only slightly changed since we first met. Despite the troubled atmosphere at home, Tracy maintained a calm facade. Meanwhile, I struggled to keep my composure, simply informing her of my fatigue before retiring to bed. Her brief kiss on my lips as I passed by left me with an unsettling suspicion. I could have sworn I tasted the essence of another woman on her lips. That night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I heard Tracy speaking quietly on the phone with Kate after the children had gone to bed. Their conversation was brief, followed shortly by the sound of Tracy entering the shower, a behavior that struck me as out of the ordinary. It seemed my presence had unnerved her enough to let her guard down, or perhaps she believed I was already asleep, unaware of her actions. The sinking feeling in my chest grew heavier. The rest of the weekend passed with minimal interaction between us, occupied mostly by mundane tasks and attending to the children. Tracy suggested a family dinner on Saturday night, but I declined abruptly and left the room, a rare display of rudeness toward her that surely signaled my distress. Come Monday morning at work, I sought a few hours off due to personal issues, a request my understanding boss, John, granted without hesitation. He empathized, having navigated his own divorce years ago and remarried since. As I was about to leave his office, he handed me a business card, the contact information for his divorce attorney. "I'm sorry, Ron. I always thought you and Tracy were solid," John remarked sympathetically. "Yeah, me too," I replied with a heavy heart. "Thanks for understanding." With John's recommendation, I met with the attorney 2 days later. Despite her likely familiarity with such situations, she approached me with genuine concern, guiding me through the legal process with compassion. She was surprised when I declined the suggestion of hiring a private investigator for concrete proof of Tracy's infidelity. I saw the spark in her eyes, I recounted to the attorney. Besides, being in a no-fault state, there doesn't seem much point. The only potential benefit might be if she makes it difficult regarding visitation with the girls, but I doubt that'll happen. Despite my efforts, I couldn't muster any enthusiasm around Tracy and the girls at home. Tracy seemed to have figured it out, probably because of our lack of communication. I suspected the girls sensed something was amiss from our subdued interactions. I had given Tracy ample opportunities to talk, but she remained silent. Things came to a head when Tracy was served divorce papers at her workplace the following week. Call it petty, but I wanted her to experience a fraction of the pain I had endured. I imagine she was served around 11:03 a.m. because my phone began ringing off the hook at 11:05. I ignored all 15 calls from her and a few from unknown numbers, assuming she was trying to reach me through friends. Strangely, I felt a surge of energy for the first time since discovering her with Kate, and I had a productive afternoon on the road. When I arrived home at 5:30, Tracy's car was already parked in the garage. She wasted no time in confronting me. "You coward. You didn't have the guts to confront me face to face, but you had me served in front of everyone," Tracy shouted as soon as I turned off the car. I remained silent until I entered the house and set down my things. From the sounds emanating from the family room, I knew the girls were there. I thought I was being considerate. "I wanted to ensure you were served while your lover could comfort you," I replied calmly. "You know about Kate?" "But how?" How?" Tracy stammered. "We were so careful." "Not careful enough, apparently," I retorted. "Just answer me 2 things, how long, and when were you going to tell me?" 6 months, maybe," she muttered. "We were going to tell you soon, I swear." Tracy's demeanor shifted from anger to shock in mere seconds. She stumbled over to the kitchen table and slumped into a chair. I walked over to the liquor cabinet above the fridge, grabbed my bottle of Buffalo Trace bourbon, poured myself a double, and sat across from her. If looks could kill, she would have been dead within seconds under my glare. She couldn't meet my eyes, keeping hers fixed on the table. "How could I not have known you were bisexual after all this time?" I murmured. "Because I didn't know myself until recently," Tracy replied softly. "It just became clear to me gradually. I swear, this wasn't something I planned. It just happened." She finally met my gaze, her eyes pleading. "This doesn't have to change anything between us, Ronnie. I still love you as much as ever. But there's this other part of me that I need to explore. If you truly love me like you say you do, you would understand and give me time to figure this out," Tracy pleaded. I fell silent, stunned. "So 6 months wasn't enough of an exploration, huh?" I retorted sarcastically. "If you truly loved me, you would have honored our vows and not explored at all. I thought fidelity had nothing to do with gender." "But what if this doesn't work out for me?" she protested. "Then I'd lose both her and you. Maybe you should have thought about that before embarking on your first journey. Why would I willingly be your backup plan?" I countered. Because you love me, remember? Real love should forgive a mistake, she insisted. One time is a mistake, Tracy. 6 months is a choice. What reality are you living in? Yes, I do love you, I continued, my tone softening. But loving you doesn't mean I'll stand by while you tear my heart out and tear apart our family. This isn't about the girls, she began. You selfish. I interrupted, unable to contain my anger. This is entirely about the girls. They're the ones whose lives will be torn apart because you felt the need to explore. Well, I never expected you to react like this, she shot back defensively. No, you just never expected to get caught so you could figure out your next move. You've changed right before my eyes, I accused bitterly. And no, Tracy, you don't love me as much as before. I've seen the way you look at her. You love her the way you used to love me, with your whole being. You might still love me, but I'm clearly second best now. You might love me, but you're not in love with me anymore. You're in love with her. That's not true, Ronnie, she pleaded desperately. Stop, Tracy. I shouted, cutting her off. I'm not naive, and I know what I saw. I know you better than anyone else, and I saw everything. Her expression turned guilty, and then realization dawned on her. You saw us together? Oh my God. She whispered. Exactly, I affirmed. But, Ronnie, this doesn't have to be the end for us, she rushed to say. It's not like there's another man involved. It's completely different. No, it's not completely different. I countered firmly. You love someone else instead of me. That's the bottom line. And maybe it would be different if it were another man. At least then I could punch your lover in the face. Can we at least handle this civilly? She implored. Honestly, I don't know, I replied quietly. She might be a beautiful woman, but she's also the person who stole my wife. The harsh reality remains unchanged just because you happen to fall for a woman. A few months later, I discovered that the kids were completely unaware of Tracy's affair. To them, Aunt Kate was simply a close friend of Mom's. They had noticed occasional quick kisses and gentle touches between them, but since Kate wasn't a man, they didn't see anything unusual. It came to light one evening when the kids and I went out for dinner, and they casually mentioned that Kate had been spending more time at home since I moved out. They had put together on their own that Aunt Kate was a factor in Tracy and I divorcing. Living in a no-fault state meant our financial matters were divided fairly evenly. I ended up paying a small amount of alimony, while Tracy kept the house until the kids finished college, and naturally, I paid child support. I settled into an apartment just a short drive from our former home. Tracy and I maintained contact through our daughters. We both made concerted efforts to support them fully in their school and extracurricular activities. For some reason, Tracy fought hard against the divorce, dragging it out for a year before it was finalized. Encountering Tracy and Kate at our daughters' events, I remained civil but distant. Although invited to family gatherings, I often declined knowing Tracy would be present. It meant forfeiting cherished family moments, but I struggled to keep my composure whenever Tracy and Kate were around. Instead, I dedicated solo days to celebrating birthdays and holidays with the kids. As expected, we retained our respective friends from before marriage. Most of the friends we gained during our marriage sided with Tracy. One husband even explained that many felt uncomfortable around me, given I had lost my wife to another woman. Some insinuated I deserved it, a sentiment echoed by a few of the wives. I let those friendships fade without protest, understanding the truth of the saying that adversity reveals true friends. By choice, I didn't pursue dating much in the following years. My heart wasn't in it, and I didn't crave companionship deeply. After a year alone, I sought solace at the local animal shelter, where I adopted a small German Shepherd mix, approximately 3 years old. I specifically asked to meet the 3 dogs that had been there the longest. The one I chose had arrived as a playful puppy but had grown withdrawn and despondent after being overlooked repeatedly. I felt a kinship with him, both of us having experienced rejection. The dog's name was Bob. Not some whimsical pet name or a reference to a Disney character. Just Bob. Bob understood me, and I understood Bob. The first thing he did when I brought him home to my apartment was to explore a bit, then hop onto the sofa next to me and curl up by my side. He got along well with the girls during weekends they spent with me, but Bob seemed happiest when it was just the two of us guys. He loved going for walks or rides with me, and we could have silent conversations about almost anything. Even though Bob didn't say much, his attentive expression and perked ears showed he was listening to every word. Several years later, my oldest daughter Lisa met a guy at college from Boston and they got married. Being successful in my career as an engineer allowed me to give her the wedding she had always dreamed of. Walking her down the aisle was a moment of immense pride for me, though I did get a gentle scolding from her afterward for stumbling over my one line. At the rehearsal, I had nailed it, but nerves got the best of me during the actual ceremony, and I responded with an I do instead of the correct her mother and I do. I blamed it on being emotional. Sue me. Taking my seat in the front row, one chair away from Tracy, she leaned over and whispered, "That was total bullshit, and you know it." Kate, leaning forward from Tracy's other side, shot me a glare that I must admit was quite effective. "Mouthed fuck you, bitch," I silently replied after checking if the pastor could see. Weddings always stirred up memories for me. Initially, I fondly reminisced about my own wedding day. That nostalgia lasted all of 30 seconds before my mind flashed to the image of Tracy and Kate together in that restaurant the moment I found out about them. When I snapped out of my thoughts, Tracy was looking at me with a mix of sadness and embarrassment before quickly averting her gaze. Apparently, I wasn't the only one taking a trip down memory lane. Despite not intending to observe them, I couldn't help but notice Tracy and Kate enjoying themselves immensely, along with Lisa and her new husband Jerry, and everyone else in attendance. It was then that I realized I was one of the few single people over 50 in the room. Feeling sorry for myself, I made my way over to the open bar provided by Jerry's parents and poured myself a shot of 18-year-old Irish whiskey. Sitting back down at my table, I quietly congratulated myself on hosting such a successful event. 3 years later, I found myself preparing to play the role of father of the bride once again as my youngest daughter, Ariel, prepared to tie the knot. Determined not to attend solo this time, I finally made a concerted effort to get back into the dating scene. 3 weeks later, returning from a business trip, I stopped at a small honky-tonk bar and restaurant about an hour from my apartment. Despite my usual aversion to country music, they advertised great pulled pork barbecue, so I decided to give it a try. The place was lively, and around 8 p.m., a stunning woman in her 30s walked in alone. She had the face of an angel, and I couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to a honky-tonk. Then again, I had to laugh at the irony of an older white guy like me being there too. Deciding to make a move, I motioned for the bartender to put her drink on my tab. He conveyed the message, and she gracefully approached my table to thank me. We hit it off, and she introduced herself as Jade. We were having a great time when she casually invited me back to her place. Excited by the invitation, I was caught off guard when a guy in a cowboy hat approached us and kissed Jade on the cheek. He introduced himself as Fred, Jade's husband, and mentioned he was there to watch. Stunned, I protested, feeling this was completely out of line. "It's okay, Ron. Fred and I are into this," Jade assured me, while Fred grinned sheepishly. "Not my thing," I replied sharply. "This is messed up." I signaled a stop to both of them, then walked out to my car alone, feeling bewildered by the encounter. My next attempt at dating came through my church. Carrie, a 50-year-old divorcee with striking black hair, 34B breasts, long legs, and a warm smile, caught my attention. We hit it off and went on several dates. By our fourth date, we ended up back at my place, where things quickly heated up. However, during an intimate moment, she inadvertently called out her ex-husband's name, Jim, in the midst of passion. I immediately stopped, taken aback. Carrie looked at me with anger in her eyes once she realized what had happened. "Why the hell did you stop?" she screamed at me, her anger palpable. "Because I'm not your damn ex-husband, you idiot," I shot back. The rest of the drive to her place was intense silence. Needless to say, there wasn't a fifth date. For my next attempt at dating, I asked out a colleague, Allison Webb, for a night of food and dancing. Allison, a vivacious 42-year-old blonde, had been divorced for almost 5 years from her husband of 17 years. We'd been friends at work for a decade, sharing our respective tales of woe. We had a fantastic time out, leading to several more great evenings together. Our chemistry was undeniable even before we took things to the next level. With Ariel's wedding approaching, I invited Allison to be my date. "You want me to be your date at your daughter's wedding? With your family and ex-wife there?" "I'm not sure I'm up for that," Allison said honestly. "Well, that's assuming you get the green light from Bob first," I added. "Who's Bob?" she asked, puzzled. "Bob's my wingman," I explained. "My best friend in the whole world. A 45-pound German Shepherd mix with very discerning taste. If he doesn't like you, you're out." "You're a strange man, Ron," she chuckled. Allison passed Bob's inspection the following week and agreed to accompany me to the wedding. The girls seemed thrilled that I wouldn't be flying solo for the occasion. Tracy, however, made no secret of her disapproval, shooting me disapproving looks every chance she got. While I didn't care for her opinion, it bothered Allison, who sensed Tracy's animosity toward her immediately. "What's your problem, Tracy?" I finally confronted her during the rehearsal dinner. "Do you really have to ask, Ron? Are you dating Girl Scouts? What's next, brownies? Sperm?" Her jealousy wasn't a good look. "Actually, Tracy, Allison is the same age as Kate." "I haven't forgotten that you traded me in for a younger, female version," I retorted. Tracy looked sheepish, at least acknowledging her hypocrisy. A year later, Allison became my second wife, and life moved forward. I had completely forgotten that I was on the bone marrow registry until I received a call at work one day, informing me that after 30 years, I was a match for someone in need. I was thrilled at the chance to potentially save a life. Despite knowing the marrow extraction might be uncomfortable, my hero complex kicked in, and I eagerly agreed to proceed. After additional testing, the extraction was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and I gave my enthusiastic consent to move forward. I'm not particularly religious, but I do believe in God, and they say God works in mysterious ways. I never thought much about that until 4 days later when I was talking to my eldest daughter, Lisa, during our weekly call. Lisa and Ariel and I typically avoid discussing their mother, Tracy, and her life, but for some reason, Lisa mentioned that a marrow match had been found for Aunt Kate, and both she and Tracy were very excited about it. I expressed my surprise to Lisa, as I didn't know Kate was ill, and she filled me in on Kate's year-long battle with leukemia. I asked Lisa to pass on my best wishes to Kate and Tracy, explaining that although I would never fully get over what they did to me, I didn't wish them any harm. "You know, Dad, you're a grown man. You can call them and tell them yourself," Lisa chided gently. "You're right, honey, but the less I interact with them, the less chance there is that I'll say something hurtful that I might regret later," I admitted honestly. "Dad, it's been 16 years since the divorce. It's time to move on," she pressed. "You've been happily married to Allison for almost 2 years now. You keep telling me how happy you are." "I am happy, sweetheart, but the pain from your mother's betrayal will always linger. I don't hate her anymore, but she's certainly not someone I consider a friend," I confessed. "Well, sending flowers and a card with good wishes sounds like the right thing to do," Lisa suggested. I didn't think much about it until I called a local florist and arranged for a bouquet of flowers and a get well card to be sent over. As I was giving my credit card details to the florist, a thought struck me: bone marrow matches are rare, and the timing of my match and Kate finding a match seemed too coincidental. The donation process is supposed to be anonymous, so I knew I wouldn't get a straight answer from the marrow registry directly, unless I was a bit sneaky. I called my registry contact, sounding optimistic, and casually asked how common it was for a donor and recipient to live in the same city. She stumbled over her words and eventually asked how I knew who my match was. So, I fibbed a little. People talk, and we have mutual connections through our kids, I replied vaguely. This is unprecedented, she admitted. I murmured as my mind raced. There was no way I was going to donate bone marrow to someone who had betrayed me like Tracy did. They never acknowledged what they did, and now they expected me to save Kate's life? Not a chance. 2 days later, I called my registry contact back and informed her that I was declining to proceed with the donation. She was clearly taken aback, and after regaining her composure, she asked if there was a specific reason for my decision. She explained that while I had the right to withdraw, it was highly unusual and would cause a lot of concern at the registry. I apologized for any inconvenience caused, but reiterated that it was in my best interest to decline. She expressed her regrets and advised me to contact her if I changed my mind soon. Allison was furious when I confessed that I had backed out of the bone marrow donation. At that point, I hadn't disclosed to her that I knew who the recipient was supposed to be. She simply saw it as me reneging on a commitment that could potentially save someone's life. What the hell is wrong with you? My wife of 2 years practically screamed at me. You know you wanted to do this. Now that the opportunity is here, you're messing with someone's chance at life. It was the first time I had heard Allison use such strong language. She was beyond angry. I realized I needed to be honest with her, though my explanation didn't seem to impress her. Are you seriously willing to deny that woman a chance to live just for revenge? Please tell me I'm wrong, she yelled, her frustration evident. It's not about revenge, I argued. I wouldn't give either her or my ex-wife the time of day if I had a watch and they didn't. They both betrayed me, and I've kept my distance. Why should I change now just because Kate's in trouble? I'm the one who was hurt here, and I'm just being consistent, if nothing else. Allison, it's all anonymous. I only found out accidentally, I added. Allison's expression softened. Ronnie, you can't back out on this. You hold this woman's life in your hands. It would be wrong not to help if you can, she pleaded quietly. You're too good of a person to do this. You know the guilt will eat away at you eventually. No, Ellie. I don't think guilt will be an issue. Kate broke my heart, and Tracy stood by and let it happen. Besides, they'll never know it was me. But Ronnie, they had hope, and now you've shattered it, Allison countered. For the next few days, Allison and I argued bitterly, and it felt like we were growing apart as a couple. This was the most vehement disagreement we had ever had. Where's your Christian compassion, Ronnie? Allison challenged me at one point. So if a beggar asks me for money to buy bullets to shoot me, I'm just supposed to hand it over blindly? I retorted. Now you're being unreasonable, she shot back. They tore out my heart and turned my life upside down. Am I supposed to just forget that and help them now? I asked quietly. It's been 17 years. Tracy's been with Kate longer than she was with you. Move on. Allison urged. They made their choices, I replied solemnly. They'll have to live with those choices, or not, as the case may be. With that, I walked away. A few days later, on a Saturday afternoon, I informed Allison that I was heading to the shooting range to blow off some steam. Make sure you're back well before dinner. The girls are coming over, and I don't want you smelling like gunpowder, so shower before we eat, she instructed me. I blasted away at a target with my SIG 9mm, unloading 500 rounds. Shooting always calms me down, it requires intense focus, and afterward, my body relaxes. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Returning home smelling of gunpowder, I quickly hit the shower. Allison had set the dining table for 6, cooking what smelled like a roast, her specialty. I hoped she made those delicious brown potatoes instead of mashed. After showering, I poured myself rye and got Allison a glass of wine. She seemed tense, probably anxious about the meal for our daughters and their husbands. I gave her a quick kiss. Reading on my computer in the living room, I heard the door open. It wasn't just our daughters who walked in, but also Tracy and a disheveled Kate. I wasn't pleased to see them, shooting Allison a glare as I rose to greet everyone. I kissed our daughters but ignored Tracy and Kate, noting their overly enthusiastic greeting to Allison and the whispered conversations. Not naive, I realized Allison had orchestrated this intervention, a setup, not a mere family dinner. I debated leaving but decided it was time to confront things. First, though, I endured the facade of a friendly gathering, with Kate's illness dominating conversation. Dinner and dessert passed in a blur. I couldn't tell you how they tasted. Playing the gracious host, I served after-dinner drinks and led everyone to the living room. In the quiet moment that followed, I decided to kick off the inevitable confrontation. So who's going to speak first? The woman who betrayed my trust to set up this meeting? Or the woman who shattered my heart years ago but now expects a favor from me? Or maybe we should hear from the woman who stole a married wife from a loving husband, but now, in a cruel twist, needs that cuckold's help to survive. I scanned their faces as I spoke. None could meet my gaze. Allison looked particularly uneasy, caught off guard by my directness. It was Lisa, my eldest daughter, who broke the silence. Apparently, I hadn't spared her or her sister from my anger. Dad, we know you're still angry at Mom and Aunt Kate. But refusing the marrow donation is petty and beneath you, she began. You think denying someone life is revenge? That's just wrong. This isn't about revenge, Dad. We're talking about someone's life, not just a petty act. Lisa's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I took a sip of rye, collecting my thoughts before responding. Did any of you even consider my perspective for a moment? I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. Every action has consequences. Tracy and Kate didn't expect those consequences to be so severe, but that's their burden now, and they're trying to make it mine. Who would have thought I'd have a chance to affect the life of someone who wronged me so deeply? You all think this is about revenge, about me reclaiming some self-respect. How could I respect myself if I helped the person who stole my wife alive? And don't think for a second that I should go easy on Kate just because she's a woman. If Kate were Carl, a 6 feet 2 inches, 200-pound man, most of you would probably support my stance. Gender makes no difference to me. Kate is a homewrecker who knew exactly what she was doing. Kate stared at the floor, Tracy squeezing her hand in support. Tracy's eyes were brimming with tears now. Do you really hate me so much that you deny someone a chance at life? If you ever loved me even half as much as you claim, could you find it in you to do what's right? The honorable thing? That's rich, coming from you, I retorted bitterly. I loved you as much as I said I did, but hate is just a step away from love, especially love betrayed. You don't get to lecture me on honor. My voice had risen, and I struggled to contain my anger. I resisted the urge to tell them all, including Allison, to leave me alone. Taking deep breaths, I tried to regain composure. Ronnie, you're a good man. You always do what's right, Allison interjected softly. Backing out now is wrong. You won't forgive yourself for this. Dad, you've always taught Ariel and me to do the right thing, even when it's hard, Lisa added, her voice pleading. This is the right thing for me, I replied firmly. I won't regret this decision or lose any sleep over it. Please, please. Kate's plea broke through the tension. I know I hurt you deeply, but I don't want to die. The doctors say my chances are slim without your marrow, maybe even with it. Her eyes bore into mine, haunted and desperate. It was clear this was the hardest thing she'd ever had to ask. I met her gaze, my heart heavy with sorrow, but resolute in my decision. No, was all I said. I didn't apologize because I had no remorse. I refused to lift a finger to aid this woman. Kate accepted my answer more gracefully than Tracy, who broke down in tears. Allison went to comfort them, whispering, I'll try. I'll talk to him. In that moment, Allison didn't realize she jeopardized our marriage. I knew I'd need to seriously consider whether I could forgive this breach of trust. I grabbed my car keys and left without a word, leaving behind 5 sobbing women. I didn't return home for 3 days, ignoring numerous calls from Allison and the kids. The house was dark when I finally did, indicating Allison was staying elsewhere temporarily. Some clothes were missing, and I packed a suitcase with most of mine. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen table. 3 days later at work, I received a call from an unidentified woman. I guessed it was Allison, and I was right. "So, we're done because I tried to stop you from being the biggest asshole on the planet? I can't believe I married someone who would let someone die for revenge." "You're despicable," Allison said. "And I can't believe I married a woman who would betray my trust so completely. But you know what? We can both be relieved of that burden," I replied. "And if anyone's seeking revenge, it's not me, it's God. Remember the biblical saying, 'Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord'? What greater vengeance than to deny a potential life-saving cure to the person who wronged me most?" "You're just awful, you know that?" Allison retorted. Kate passed away 2 months after our divorce was finalized. I saw her obituary in the local paper. I hadn't kept up with her condition, and my daughters hadn't spoken to me since the intervention. I love my children, but sometimes you have to stand firm in your convictions, even when they're unpopular. My decision was right for me. I never lost a moment's sleep over withholding my marrow from Kate. The marrow registry staff didn't understand my position and removed me from their list. That was fine with me. I had little chance of finding another match anyway. Bob was showing his age, a bit cantankerous and unimpressed by the women I'd introduced over the past year. At 62, I wasn't hunting for wife number 3. Surprisingly, I still enjoyed a satisfying sex life. In this age bracket, eligible women outnumbered men 4-1, and if she was healthy, my date for the evening often welcomed some intimacy, albeit with the aid of lubricant. We weren't as spry as in our youth, we had to be cautious not to break a hip, but we both found pleasure in our rendezvous. I humorously referred to my companions as my sexy senior singles. It had been over 4 years since I'd spoken to any family members when Ariel, my youngest, called out of the blue to inform me of Tracy's recent passing. Despite our estrangement, we'd shared 15 years together and had 2 children, so I felt obliged to attend the funeral. Perhaps it was a chance to mend bridges with my daughters. I sat alone at the back during the service, which was dignified. After the burial, I approached my daughters and their families. They greeted me cautiously, tentative hugs from the girls, firm handshakes from their husbands, and shy hellos from my 3 grandchildren. We adjourned to a nearby restaurant to talk. It took only 3 minutes before Lisa fired the first shot. "Tell me again why you let Aunt Kate die," she blurted out. "Looks like nothing's changed after 4 years," I sighed. "We're back to the wife-stealing accusations." "Jerry, see that handsome young guy over there by the bar?" I asked, nodding towards a 20-something man with blonde hair and blue eyes. "What if he came over and kissed Lisa? What would you do?" "I'd knock him out," Jerry declared. "Right. And what if you found out he was having an affair with Lisa?" "Dead man walking," Jerry replied promptly. "Exactly. But if he's dead, you wouldn't have to worry about donating bone marrow if he got sick, right?" "I guess not," Jerry admitted. "That's my point," I said firmly. "I didn't let Kate die, partly because she was a woman, my mistake, perhaps. But why should I save someone's life who was involved in an affair with my wife? Or who stole her away completely?" "You shouldn't," Jerry agreed, the realization dawning on him. He glanced around at everyone else in the room, who slowly began to understand. "I'm not proud of my decision, but I'm not ashamed either," I continued quietly. "She took the love of my life and didn't deserve my sympathy." "But if you loved Mom, how could you?" Ariel asked, her voice trembling. "I loved your mother with all my heart. When she broke it, well, a lot of that love turned to hate. I'm only human." But I'm not the monster she made me out to be. Just human. It didn't end well for your mother. The other adults in the room had tears in their eyes. The children looked on, unsure and concerned. This will take time for all of us, I said gently. Let's take it one day at a time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.